Awesome. Hello. Welcome to the complete intro to SQL. Please turn off your sound. Sorry. We'll start again. Hi. Welcome to the complete intro to SQL. I am Brian Holt, or complete intro to SQL. I know I'm going to get people upset about how to pronounce that. I will probably say both, because I have no consistency in my life, but that's between me and my therapist. Anyway, let's click on the introduction here. Oh, first of all, actually, I want you to go to sql.holt.courses. That'll take you to this website here. This is literally all of my course notes. This is everything I'm going to be teaching you today. I have two computers here because I teach from this one and I read from this one. I have my notes up here. So if you fall behind, or if you want to review something, or if you want to share this with your friend, this site is open and free forever. Okay, so now that we've done that, we're going to click on the introduction. Just to show you how this kind of works, up here in the top right, you see Welcome Introduction. This is the name of the section. This is the name of the lesson, so that if you jump ahead, or if you fall behind, or if you just want to know where I am, you can just see the Welcome Introduction, Welcome Introduction. It matches up so you can kind of use a breadcrumb to find where you are. Okay, and with that, let's get into the introduction to this course. My name is Brian Holt. I've taught too many courses here. I literally can't count how many times I've been here. And I want to teach you about SQL today. So SQL it's a language. It's not necessarily a programming language, though you'll see here in a little bit you can kind of turn it into a programming language. But there's an incredible amount of depth here. And I think that makes it seem a little unapproachable to people. It seems like they have to learn this entire new programming language, but in reality you can get, I would say, almost all the benefit of SQL with a very small subset of knowledge. Don't get me wrong, there's people that have decades of experience here that can do wild things with it. We're not going there today. I'm trying to get you something really, really practical. And I guess that's the kind of one of the first points I want to hammer on. This is a course for developers. I'm not going to teach you how to replicate. I'm not going to teach you how to deploy. I'm not going to teach you how to manage instances of Postgres. You want to learn that from like a DBA or from an ops person, and I am neither of those. What I am going to teach you today is if you're a developer and you want to write queries to an SQL database, or you need to create some tables, or you need to model some data, that's stuff that we're going to talk about today. So yeah, here's kind of some examples of things you're going to learn: how to set up databases and tables, what's going to go into your tables. We're going to write just the smallest bit of Node.js today, because I actually wanted to get you your hands on code querying a database. If you don't know Node, that's fine. You can just kind of follow along. Those kinds of things. So who is this course for? It's for you, hopefully. The things that I'm going to suggest that you know before you take this course that'll be really helpful. Just internet fundamentals. There's a great course from Jen from Front of Masters that goes over like how the internet works and a bunch of stuff like that. It's very good to have that done first. Some basic coding abilities will be really helpful. If this is your very first coding class ever, that's going to be hard. It's probably still possible, to be honest with you, but it will be hard. And then a little Node.js would go a long ways. And I linked 3 different Front of Masters courses here for you to kind of brush up on those. Yeah.
What about Jem's full stack?
What about Jem's full stack course? I mean, it's a great course. I don't think you need to take it before you take this course, but you could. I guess Jem does talk like a little bit about Node.js, right?
He talks about everything, like how the internet works, basics of sysadmin, all those kinds of things.
Yeah. If you wanted to go more in that direction, certainly that course would be really helpful. Yeah. Cool. So your setup, I have tested this both on Mac OS and on Windows 10. If it works on Windows 10, it should work on Windows 11. And if you're doing this on Linux, you probably already know everything I'm about to tell you, so you can just ignore me at this point. But you can just follow, I'm kidding, you can follow the Mac OS instructions and that'll work for Linux just fine. You won't need a particularly powerful computer for this. I would recommend about 8 gigs of RAM. That's probably the thing that's going to like gate you the most, but you could probably do this on 4, or 2 would be hard, but you could probably do this on 4. You will need to use Docker. You don't have to know Docker. If you would like to know Docker, I teach a whole course on Docker for front-end masters. But I will give you all the Docker instructions. This is not a Docker course. You do not have to use Visual Studio Code, though I will be using it. And I will show you a couple of tricks for it just throughout the course. I used to work on it, so I like it. People always ask me to hear my setup, so I put it in here. But the font is Mona Lisa. I just use the default Dark Plus theme. I use iTerm 2, and then this VS Code icons extension. So if you want to come back later and you're wondering how I set things up, it's all linked there. Where to file issues, there is a repo here. So if you open this, this is the course website here. So here you can open issues, you can open pull requests. I'm going to ask you, if you have questions, don't message me, put them on the repo, because then later if someone else has the same question, they can Google it and find it in the repo. And pull requests are very welcome, particularly because I always have a ton of spelling and grammar mistakes in my courses. Cool. All right, just a little background on me. I know it probably helps a little bit to know who's telling you this. Yeah.
Before you get into it, could you talk about maybe how this course differs from your Intro to Databases course?
That's a good question. So there is another course on Front-End Masters, which I'll pull up really quick here, that I taught previously, called Complete Intro to Databases. This is all still current and useful. This covers 4 different types of databases. This is more comparative of like, I'm thinking about this problem that I have, how should I model the data, right? And so it goes over an SQL database, which is Postgres, right? So this section here is going to largely overlap with what I'm going to teach today, but we're going to go into much more depth today. But this class also goes into graph databases, key value stores, as well as NoSQL databases. Specifically, it goes into MongoDB, Postgres. This is Neo4j, and then this is Redis. So this is much more like a higher level, comparing use NoSQL for these kinds of problems, use Postgres for these kinds of problems, use Redis for these kinds of problems, right? Whereas this class is specifically teaching you in-depth SQL so that you can, work with an SQL. You've already decided to use an SQL database. This one's going to help you choose that you want to use an SQL database, if that makes any sense. Yeah, cool. So that one's out. I think I taught it last year, something like that. It's a good course. I liked it. And the art's cool. I really liked that piece of art. Anyway. Okay, so who am I? My name's Brian, and I work at Stripe. Specifically at Stripe, I am the product owner of the Stripe SDKs, the Stripe VS Code extension, the Stripe React Native experience, the CLI, a bunch of developer tools, right? So that's kind of the theme of my entire career. For the most part, I've worked on developer tools. Previous to being at Stripe, I worked on VS Code, and I worked on Azure. I was the owner of JavaScript on Azure. And then before that, I was a Node.js and JavaScript front-end developer for like a decade. I worked at LinkedIn, Netflix, Reddit. I started teaching at Front-End Masters when I worked at Reddit, so that's been, we're coming up on a decade of me teaching at Front-End Masters, which is crazy to think about. I've written a lot of code and queries over the years. I started coding probably around when I was 10. My brother made me write code before he'd let me play video games, so I'm both still upset at my brother and also thankful, because here I am. But I'm going to tell you right now that you can learn these skills at like any point, right? You can be 60 and starting this. You can be 5 and you can be starting this. I don't know, 5. I don't know if I'm going to teach my 5-year-old how to write queries in SQL. I don't know, maybe if he's bad. When I really started writing a lot of serious SQL was my internship, where I had to like query these, really archaic and weird databases using SQL, which taught me a lot. And then over the years at Reddit, I wrote a lot of queries. At Netflix, it's kind of been a theme throughout all my career to use SQL in various incantations. I didn't really start using Postgres until I worked at Reddit. Before that, it was mostly MySQL. But you'll see that while most of the things that we're going to talk about today are very specific to Postgres, a lot of these skills are generally applicable across all and any SQL databases. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then I live in Seattle. I like to travel, hang out with my wife and my new kid. And yeah, that's me. Feel free to catch up with me on social media. All my links are there. And the last thing I always ask people is if you can give this repo a star, it helps people find it, which is cool. It also pads my ego, which needs help sometimes. Any questions? Yeah, Dustin.
What's the secret of mastering all this skill, like you know all the most popular things? Let me rephrase that. What's the secret of mastering all these skills? I think specific to SQL, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like the person's just asking, like, Brian seems to be teaching a lot of popular tools and seems to know all these things really deeply.
Yeah,
like,
database and front-end dev.
It's not. I'm a fraud. How is it possible? You know, I think the answer to the question is I've worked on a lot of different things over my career, and I've worked over a lot of different product areas. Like, there was times in my careers where all I did was pure front-end development. There was times in my career where all I did was infrastructure. And then everything across the thing. I've gone everywhere from I designed websites at Reddit to I worked on literally cloud infrastructure at Microsoft, right? And so I've been exposed and had to do a lot of wild things. And one of the ways that I learn best is preparing teaching materials. So when I teach my colleagues and when I teach these courses, I get into a lot of depth in these things. And so that's how I really master these things myself, is I teach them to other people. But that is really my learning style, is forcing myself to try and explain this to someone else. Because when you are explaining something to someone else, you have to speak in vocabulary that they understand. So you can't use buzzwords or jargon or anything like that. You have to reduce your knowledge down to a very basic level so you can communicate these primitives to another person. And that's when I find I really solidify these kind of things in my brain.
Brian, can we redo that question? We had someone walk through the camera. So as a rule, we don't want to get up from the table unless it's like an emergency phone call or something while he's talking.
If you do, you gotta duck under the
You gotta duck way down, otherwise your head will.
Sure, just the whole thing.
Can we throw that? Could we throw that question out again?
Yep. What's the secret of mastering all these skills, like databases and front-end development?
Sure. That's a good question. The theme of my career is I've worked all over the stack, right? I went all the way from working on pure front-end applications sometimes. I did that at Reddit and Netflix. All the way to working on lower levels of the stack and doing back-end stuff. I did that at LinkedIn and also at Netflix. All the way down to I worked on cloud infrastructure at Microsoft, right? And now I do product management stuff and business stuff at Stripe. And the thing that's been critical to my success and me learning all these various different tools is that I learn by teaching, and that's just kind of my learning style. When you are forced, or when you're teaching, you are forced to kind of reduce your knowledge down to a common vocabulary between the person that you're trying to communicate with, which means that you have to break down these things that you kind of hand wave over in your brain, and you have to kind of open the box and see what's inside of it and understand really those primitives, because people are going to ask you questions and you have to kind of provide for those questions in advance. So in other words, a lot of it's from experience, and secondly, I've taught a lot of people, both teaching workshops to my coworkers and doing front-end masters and doing conference workshops. Doing all of that teaching really helps solidify these kind of basic primitives in my brain that I use to build back up into more complicated, higher level things. Cool. Other questions?
Should I take the
No, so the Complete Intro to Databases, like I said, it's kind of a different approach to a similar thing where it kind of teaches you how to model problems and what kind of database to use for each one of them. This one has no dependency on Complete Intro to Databases. This is its own thing, so you do not have to take that one before. In fact, if you take this one before, for the most part, you could probably skip the SQL section in the other one. This one is going to have more depth than the Complete Intro to Databases one. Yeah, Dustin.
Do I have to download Docker for this course?
You must download Docker in this course, and it's literally the next section that I will talk more about Docker. Cool. So, speaking of that, Docker. This is not a Docker course. I left a link here for you to my Docker course if you want to take a Docker course, which I suggest because I think containers are really important for developers. But that's not what this course is. I'm going to give you all the Docker commands, but I do need you to go download Docker Desktop or whatever flavor of Docker. But if you don't have a preferred flavor of Docker, you should use Docker Desktop because that is by far the easiest one to use. So please go install Docker Desktop. I left a link here for you. It should detect whatever desktop you're on and you can download it. And they'll kind of lead you through all the various different steps that you're going to have to do to get that up and running. And then we are going to interact a little, actually quite a bit with the command line. This is not a command line course. There is a command line course that I also teach that would be helpful, but again, not required for this. I will give you the command line commands that you are going to need. So in other words, you can basically just copy and paste all of my commands directly, and that should just work for you. If you're not familiar with Docker, Docker uses containers. A container is basically, you can think of like a mini operating system that they kind of put together for you to use. We're going to be using 2 containers and actually kind of 3 containers at one point, but these 2 are the primary ones. The first one is just the vanilla Postgres container, and then the second one is this kind of one that I built on top of it. So the second one actually depends on the first one, so Docker will handle that correctly. You don't have to do anything about that. We are going to be using specifically Postgres 14 for this course. They actually do tend to change a lot between Postgres versions, so even if you're taking this way later from when this class was filmed and Postgres 15 or 16 is out, I will suggest that you still use Postgres 14. That way everything that all the commands and stuff like that will work as is. You don't have to kind of do any translation. And then later after the course, then go learn what changed between 14 and 15 or 14 and 16. Cool. This second one here, you can click here. It's just a container that I put up on Docker Hub called Complete Intro to SQL. It has 2 different databases seated in it. It has the Open Movie database, which is a huge database with a bunch of movie stuff in it. And then there's another one for a website that you and I are going to build called Recipe Guru. Yeah, question?
What types of things would change between versions? Because I thought Postgres and like SQL is, pretty much lived forever. Like, yeah, like I don't know what types of things would change between 14 and 15 or.
It's a good question. Ask me after this section.
Okay.
I just want to get through all the Docker stuff first.
Sure.
Cool. So just know that I'm going to have you download some of these containers. They are quite large, so if you're on like metered internet, you might want to find someone that's not metered. Each one of these containers is about a half gigabyte, so I'm going to have you download about a gigabyte worth of stuff. You can run these now. This is actually going to go pull these containers. It's not going to run them yet, but it'll download them onto your computer. And then once you've done that, I want you to grab this command right here. And we're going to just paste that into our command line here. So I'm just going to paste docker run. You can see I give it a post. This is E means environment variable. So I'm going to give it a password of LOL because it's really easy to remember. Obviously, don't make your database password LOL in production. Not at all what I'm advocating. This is just something that's really easy for us to reference later. We're going to call it PG as in Postgres just because that's really easy for us to reference later. The --rm means once this container is concluded, remove all of the logs and stuff like that. Don't leave that stuff floating around. The -d is detach, which means run it in the background, don't run it in the foreground. The -p means expose this port, so we're going to expose 5432 to our local computer. Postgres is the name of the container, and the 14 is the version. So I just explained that all to you so you're aware, but you actually don't need to care at all. You can just copy and paste it and say, I don't care what Brian says. That's fine. You should get something like that. That's the hash of the container that's running. And now I should be able to say docker ps, and you can see here I have my container running. It's been up for 7 seconds. Its name is PG, and it is running on port 5432. So all good things so far. Yeah, Dustin.
This might just be a tech thing, but some people in the chat are saying that they're having a problem with the 14 tag, and running it with latest instead of 14 is working for them. So I don't know if you just want to
yeah, Docker pull.
Know that, and maybe just want to say if it's not working for you, try running it with latest. I don't know if that'll affect anything.
So the latest will work today because right now 14 is the latest. If you're watching the stream later, it might not work because 15 might be the latest, right? So Docker, anyway. You can look at here, let's just look at Docker Hub, Postgres. This will tell you all of the available containers here. So 14 was the one I was hoping you could run. You could try 14.5. You can see that as of today, 14 and latest are the same thing. But you can see already 15 is in beta. So at some point later in the future, 15 will be out, in which case latest will refer to 15. But in any case, I'm happy if you run all of these. 14.5, you can run on Alpine if you really want to. Bullseye, any one of those will be fine. But it's a good question. For all the people streaming today, you can go ahead and run latest. You have my blessing. If you're watching this later, I want you to do it on 14. Oh, I know why. I should remind me that Edis is. This shouldn't have 14. That's probably what people are mad about. Okay, I'll fix that at the break. Yes, this one run on latest, the complete intro to SQL, because I control that one. I will not publish anything that won't work with it. So yeah, BT Holt, complete intro to SQL. You can just totally omit this 14 part or put latest there. That's fine. Okay. So going back, I just want to give you enough Docker information to be dangerous. So right now we have Docker PS. That'll show you everything that's running. If you want to stop it from running, you can just say Docker kill PG, and that will stop it. So now if I say Docker PS, it's gone. And again, I can run it again. That'll start it again. That's all goodness. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. The one thing that I wanted to say about running Docker kill, it will delete everything that you've done. So if you've been following along the course and you're halfway through it and you run Docker kill, it's going to drop everything that you had. So just be aware of that. So that's both a good thing if you're trying to reset and start over, but it's a bad thing if you didn't mean to drop everything. Docker is really good about just running quietly in the background. So if I just close my laptop and come back, the Docker container typically will still be running. But if you restart your computer, for example, it will kill your containers. You could fix that by running volumes in the background, but I'm not going to show you how to do that today, so just be aware of that. The thing that you can always do The complete recipe guru database that we're going to build up over time lives inside of this complete intro to SQL one as well. So you can just pull that one and start from there as well. Yeah.
What does it mean to run Docker? Sorry. What does it mean to run the Docker container? One more time. What does it mean to run the Docker container in the background versus foreground?
That's a good question. I can just show you really quick. So if we do this Docker run and I just take this -d out, it's actually going to start Docker in the foreground. Like you can see all of the logs running immediately right in front of me, right? Now I don't want to do this, right? I just want it to run in the background and not think about the actual execution of it. But if this is useful to you and you want to see all the logs from it, this is how you would do it. What's hard about this, if I say Control-C or if I close this window, it's going to stop the container, right? So you can see there I actually shut it down. It's not running it anymore. But if I do this and I come back here and I say -d, it just runs it in the background. And I can kind of just not think about it anymore. OK. Any other questions about Docker? The last thing I want you to do here is just copy and paste this one, docker exec. If you run this, you should just immediately get a session of being connected to Postgres. So you should see this Postgres prompt here. If you do \l, it should tell you all of the databases that exist in your database, which we only have, the 3, Postgres, template 0, and template 1, which we'll talk about here in a second. So what that command did, this docker exec, this is basically saying, hey, run a bash command inside of the container. The -u means run it as the Postgres user. -it is interactive. PG is the name of the container, and PSQL is actually the name of the command that we're running inside of the container, which is the Postgres client, right? PSQL is the client to run queries against the database. So I can type exit here, and the container is still running, right? Because we're not actually ending the container, we're just exiting our session with the database. So anytime that you want to connect to it, you just run this docker exec -u postgres pg psql, and that'll put you inside of the container. That is all of the Docker information that you need to shove in your brain. Everything else, I swear to God, after this point is now just database stuff. Good? Are you all working here? Is that all good? Okay, cool. You need help?
Yeah, my thing's not running. My Docker's not running.
Okay. Should we just take a tech break then?
Let's take a 5-minute.
Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break. We'll take a look at it. If you have questions about Docker, just dump them in the chat. We'll take a look too.